Hello everyone, welcome to Big Picture Monday. My name is Cali Black, here with all the context you need to totally rock this week's Come Follow Me readings. This week we are revolving our readings around two really important and very intertwined stories that I'm excited to talk about because I feel like it can really teach us a lot about faith and what faith looks like in action. All right, we're going to read the next two chapters in Matthew, which is chapters 9 and 10. So chapters 9 and 10 in Matthew, the next chapter in Mark, which is Mark chapter 5, and then, hold on to your horses, we're going to read Luke chapter 9, which, if you've been keeping track, we read Luke chapter 7 last week. So yes, this is the first time that we are skipping a chapter in the New Testament, but hold on. I will explain to you how this all works out in a way that will calm all your fears in just a minute. I'll probably explain it too much because that's how my brain works too. Like, how do we skip Luke 8? What is going on? I will tell you why. But let's talk about these two stories that we're going to focus on this week. The first story that we're going to focus on is Jesus raising the daughter of Jairus. Jairus was a ruler in the area from the dead. Beautiful story. And then intertwined with that is that on the way to go heal Jairus's daughter, we have the story of the woman with the issue of blood reaching out to touch the hem of Jesus's garment and being healed. So these definitely are the two main focus stories. We also will get accounts of Jesus officially ordaining his 12 apostles and sending them out, right? Making it a little more official than just, hey, come follow me. But instead, you are now my apostles. I am giving you priesthood power and I'm sending you forth with power to preach to the world and to heal on your own. You now have the power to do that. So that's kind of what we're definitely focusing on, those stories this week. So keep that in mind. Let's talk about why we're skipping Luke chapter 8. From what I've been able to tell, and it's pretty clear looking at the Come Follow Me manual, think of the book of Matthew as our anchor text. The book of Matthew kind of makes sense as our anchor text because, first of all, it's the first book in the New Testament. And so a lot of people refer to the scriptures in Matthew, even if there's parallel scriptures in the other books. A lot of times we'll refer to Matthew just because it's the first one. Matthew's also the longest book. It has the most detail. And so it kind of makes sense that as we go through these readings this year, if you see, we are following the book of Matthew. And then as we read the next chapter or two in Matthew, it's then, okay, now which other chapters work with this book? And then we take breaks for the book of John every once in a while, right? That's totally different. But for Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we've got Matthew as the main guide as we're going through each week. And so then it's like, okay, what other chapters can we pull in that best support it? That's why we went for almost a month without being in the book of Mark, because it just didn't fit exactly with the book of Matthew. So the reason why we're skipping Luke chapter 8 is, I'll tell you right now, it has the parable of the sower and the seeds, and Matthew doesn't get that, doesn't tell that parable until chapter 13. So in 2 weeks, when we study Matthew chapter 13, we will then go back and hit Luke chapter 8, because that's the week we're going to really focus on that big parallel of the sower and the seeds and what ground they fall on. Okay, so it's not even necessarily, Luke chapter 9 does loosely fit in with what we're studying this week, but it's more that chapter 8 fits in much better with another week. So we are going to read all of the chapters in the New Testament this year if you follow the Come Follow Me schedule. So it's not like the Old Testament last year. If we do any skipping around, we come back and read every single chapter. So I know it's a little painful sometimes to turn that page past Luke chapter 8 and be like, here we go. But you will come back. Of course, though, you can skip around and you could read chapter 8 if you want to this week, if that would really help your heart. That's fine as well. Okay, let's talk about what's actually in the chapters this week. So let's start with our chapters in Matthew. So in chapter 9 in Matthew, if you remember right before this, we just had the story of Jesus calming the storm at sea, right? Peace, be still. So we pick up in chapter 9 with the story of Jesus with the man with the palsy, right? Which was also more of our focus last week. So we get to read Matthew's account of it, but we get the story of the man with the palsy. We get the story of Jesus eating with publicans and sinners and being really criticized for doing that. And then we get the story of a certain ruler who comes to Jesus. Now, in the book of Matthew, that's all we get. We don't get his name. He's just known as a certain ruler. In the other accounts, though, we learned that his name is Jairus, Jairus. So I'm going to refer to him as Jairus just because that is actually his name. But as you're going through the book of Matthew, if you're like, this guy doesn't have a name, he does. It's Jairus. Matthew just doesn't include it. This certain ruler approaches Jesus and tells him that his daughter is sick and dying, and he wants Jesus to come heal her. And so Jesus says, yes. So Jesus goes, and on his way there, a woman with an issue of blood reaches out and has the faith to touch the hem of Jesus's garment as he's walking through, and she's immediately healed. And Jesus and this woman have a beautiful interaction. Well, then Jesus goes on, and by the time he gets to this ruler's house, the daughter has died. And Jesus raises that daughter from the dead. Beautiful story. I absolutely love this. In Matthew chapter 9, we then get even more stories. Jesus heals 2 blind men. He's casting out some devils. Lots of things in chapter 9. And then continuing in chapter 10, this is when we get the story of Jesus giving priesthood power to his 12 apostles and officially setting apart. And he gives them lots of directions. Here's what you should do. Here's what you have power to do. Here's how you should find places to stay. And if people are accepting you, they are accepting me as well, Jesus himself. So he's giving lots of directions to his apostles. Okay, that's it for Matthew. Let's now talk about Mark chapter 5. You'll see a lot of parallels between Mark and Matthew this week, which makes it kind of nice. So in Mark chapter 5, we start off with the story of Jesus casting out the legion of devils into the swine, and the swine go into the sea, right? And then we get the story of a ruler named Jairus. We get his name this time. And same story that we study in Matthew, where Jairus asked Jesus to heal his daughter. On his way there, we get the interaction with the woman with the issue of blood. And then the daughter has died and Jesus raises her from the dead. So great to be able to study that story a different time. Again, focus on how Mark is a little more simple with his account and think about what Matthew has added to the account. Remember, Matthew's focusing on prophecies and things that Jewish people would be familiar with, or traditions, even cultural traditions that the Jews would already have been familiar with. Okay, and then lastly, Luke chapter 9. I will tell you though, this part sounds weird after I just said, like, we're trying to fit in with Matthew. The end of Luke chapter 8 that we skipped this week has the story of Jesus raising Jairus' daughter from the dead. So we are skipping over that, mostly because the rest of the chapter is about that parable. But if you want to, read the last part of chapter 8. You can see where it starts. Those little paragraph markings kind of show when a new story starts. So find that paragraph marking where it starts talking about Jesus and Jairus, the certain ruler, coming to him. And then you can read Luke's account as well. Because when we start in chapter 9, we're actually picking up with Jesus ordaining his 12 apostles and giving them priesthood power and priesthood authority, giving them the instructions. And then we move on to some new stuff that we haven't studied yet that's not really going to be our focus this week. So you can read these stories, do what you want with it, but I'll just tell you right now, we're going to focus on them a little more in future chapters when Matthew gets around to them. But first, we get the story of Jesus preaching, and the people are getting hungry, and all they have is 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And he performs the miracle and is able to feed the multitude of 5,000 men at least. We then get Peter testifying that he knows that Jesus is the Christ. Powerful story. And then finally, we get the story of Peter, James, and John being invited onto the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus. And while they're up there, they get a glimpse of Jesus being transfigured into his full power and glory. They also get to see Moses and Elias, who is Elijah, the Old Testament prophet, being able to see them on the Mount of Transfiguration as well, and being ordained with power and priesthood keys. Just a fantastic experience. We will dive into feeding the 5,000, even Peter testifying of Christ, and the Mount of Transfiguration more in future chapters, but they are great stories to start kind of get your wheels turning about what these stories are about this week. Okay, that's it. Hopefully you feel confident kind of going into the scriptures now and being able to have a little bit of that background context to understand why we're skipping in Luke, and then we'll come back. We will. I think my personal focus question is going to be about that woman with the issue of blood. For me, I feel like there's been this shift in recent years. President Nelson gave a talk fairly recently about what faith really is and how to actually increase our faith. And I think for a long time, a lot of us, maybe you feel the same way, have kind of felt that faith is just something that happens. Either you have faith or you don't. And sometimes it grows and sometimes it diminishes. But instead, what I'm learning and what current prophets are teaching and what Jesus showed at his time as well is that faith is something that we can choose to develop, and it also is something that we act on. It's not just that feeling inside, it's that feeling inside that then motivates to do things. And I can't help but think about that moment, that one moment of courage where that woman reached out knowing that this would heal her, or at least hoping, very much hoping that this would heal her. And in that one moment of courage, everything changed. Everything changed. So I kind of want to reflect on, when have I had those moments of courage where my faith motivated me to act and it changed everything? And then how can I look for those more in the future? How can I use my faith as a motivator to get something done? Something that might seem scary or might seem really out there, or a public act. How can I use my faith to do something powerful that might change the course of my life or the course of other lives that I love? All right, have a great week this week studying these beautiful stories of faith and miracles and priesthood power. Have a great week and happy studying.